Hi everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. And so today we have a special episode with Mr. Philip Vollet, and we all know Philip, and I don't think I need to introduce him to our data science community here. He is being active in this particular data science domain for past so many years, and now he had been kind of started working with our favorite package called Spacy or Explosion Company actually. So really happy to be with you, Philip, in this podcast. Welcome.
Yes, also from my side, thank you for having me. And
Sure.
yeah, say hello.
Yeah. So we have quite a bit of questions today on democratization of AI, and that's all what we are going to discuss in the next couple of hours actually. So first of all, I would like to have this question to you. So it's a very straightforward one, but like I would like to have your opinion on what democratization actually means to you.
It's a wide field, but for me, when I have to pull it down to some specific bullet points, it's about enabling people and also society to be able or to be part of this revolution of machine learning. And these also include to be that you are able to participate and you are able to be part of machine learning and doing machine learning, because when we are leaving this broad field of research and also as a topic complex to the big ones, we have always the aspects that corporates like Microsoft or Amazon or Google, they have different kinds of work ethics, but at all they are revenue driven. So there's shareholder value. So Microsoft, which that's my personal believing, or Google have a better work ethics like Amazon, but after all they are competing each other and they need to make money with machine learning, or yeah, it's part of their business to produce good results for their shareholders. And then come open source into place. So open source enables single developers or communities, big ones, small ones, to be part of this amazing technology when I push it to machine learning or natural language processing in general. Because we always have to remember that Microsoft was fighting open source. It's only 6 to 7 years ago. Steve Ballmer and Microsoft was fighting open source because they were in some kind of competition and don't see the advantage of being part of the open source community. That changed completely, and the new Microsoft is something you can love because they have so much incredible engagement and love for the open source community. So when we are looking, they are open sourcing tools, or they are providing incredible tools like VS Code, or also credits for academia in their Azure cloud. But when we are looking back, it's always possible that they changed some kind of their perspective and they always want to make money with, because that's how big corporates work, also small corporates, but it's different layer. Yeah.
Got it. So that's interesting to hear actually. So some of this risk when we are kind of open sourcing some AI engine, could you elaborate on this part?
There's always the risk that some corporate or some government is using machine learning or an AI engine for evil stuff, to manipulate people, to manipulate beliefs, to make noise in social networks, or governments are fighting each other. So the Russians are fighting the Americans and so on. So there's always this aspect that machine learning will be used in a kind of an evil vector. And that's happening anyway. So we are needing open source to have some transparency and also that people can be part of it. So, and there is always the risk that machine learning is used to do evil stuff. And the second aspect of it is that when we are looking into our open source ecosystem, let me use the example of Redis or Elastic, which have super cool open source libraries, and so it's open sourced also for Red Hat Linux. And then big cloud players jump in and use this technology in their cloud services. When we're looking at Amazon, they're having an equivalent in their cloud for Redis. They are also hosting Redis per se, but they have a DynamoDB, which is in-memory message store, or you can cover some aspects of Redis in DynamoDB, and Redis was highly influential for DynamoDB. And the same is for Elastic. So when we are looking at Elastic, so that's also the reason why Elastic changed its license, that big cloud players come in and use the technology and make money with it, and then we are having no revenue back for the open source project. So it's hard, or it's disparity between these technology. We're having Elastic, and then Amazon is using this technology, but we haven't any revenue floating back into the open source projects. And that's something we have to take care of it. And that's also a risk when you're open sourcing your machine learning engine or your product, or so that some of the players in the game can look at your technology, copycat it, and make money with it. So, yeah.
Got it. True. So, so this is something very generic actually. So, which platform or tool comes to your mind first when we talk about open source?
For me, everything starts with Linux as open source, because in the 90s, there was Linus Torvalds, this crazy guy, which is open sourcing some weird operating system. At these times, we were using MS-DOS, novel NetWare for sure, and Windows NT for servers. And then there was this strange open source Unix-based technology or operating system, which was completely customizable. So you can do everything you want with it, but there wasn't a graphical user interface in the early days. It was only command line, and you're doing your stuff in the config files and doing the configuration. And then we're having our first window manager, and then it grows. But open source in general was completely new at these times, and it was from the business guys, they looked on open source like it's some kind of communism. It cannot be worked. You are not able to make money with it. And Microsoft was fighting open source, and some of the big players jumped in. But it was some kind of revolution. So open source and Linux was the starting point for it, and it was wild. And yeah, maybe we have some aspects of sharing and sharing community. So this communistic aspect, but this was my starting point into open source, and yeah.
Got it. That's actually cool to know. So my next question is like, so when we are talking about AI, and we all are actually building models and stuff, but I don't think most of us are even thinking about the responsible AI mechanism, which should be very much important nowadays when we are dealing with large chunk of data, which is so much biased towards every aspect actually. So what is your count on this responsible AI and how we should actually implement it?
This has two dimensions for me. The first one is, of course, the bias, and also that we need transparency to analyze the models, or we have to know why a model is hitting some aspects which are maybe biased. So, but we are throwing, most of the time we are throwing a lot of data into it, and then we have some kind of fitting and need also a testing or an understanding what's under the surface of the model is leading to these buyers. But also we are having a carbon footprint of machine learning, which is the second aspect, because we are scaling our machine learning models and they are getting bigger and bigger. And you need more resources to process these models. And there is also the aspect of a carbon footprint. So yeah, it's important. That's also the reason why we are needing open source, so that we are keeping an eye on the players in the game like Microsoft or Google and being part of it, and yeah, also make noise for it, so that we're saying, hey, we are having some kind of bias, or we need to change in reason of getting better and yeah.
Got it. Got it. So, talking about the distribution change in a typical data science project. So, I found this interesting chart actually by PwC. Also, which spectrum do you believe like which is most crucial when it comes to democratization?
After all, they are all connected together, and you have a bunch of aspects in every of these steps. So the first step there is that we are needing access to the data, and there is an untold truth. We are throwing all the data for the big machine learning models like OpenGPT. We are using all data which is written into the internet. So data out of Twitter, data out of Reddit, and also scrape data from Wikipedia or other web pages. But we need some kind of transparency and also the access to these big data clusters in reason to enable researchers or people to also train their models. So not only left the space for the big ones, so that people are able to also doing machine learning. But there's also an ethical aspect in it, in reason of not every data on the internet, or people, when people are putting their data into the internet or in a subreddit and writing about their belief, or some topics where their heart belongs, at the moment they are not aware that these data will be used in machine learning or be part of a machine learning model. That's also a reason why some kind of bias is coming into place. So we need the awareness, we need the transparency, and we need that people are able to access this kind of data, because it's in the terabytes, in the thousands of terabytes. So then the next step is the storage and compute, which is needing resources. So when our machine learning models are going heavier and heavier and needing also more storage and computing power. And when you're hosting this data and also these machine learning models, or having an interference API where you can use one of the big machine learning models, it costs money to host it. So that's also one part that the player in the game also need to make money with products, because they have to host such infrastructure. When we're looking at Hugging Face or also in Microsoft, it costs money to host it. So, and then to enable academia and also researchers to access also the big models. So having cloud credits or some kind of scholarship for cloud credits is an important factor here. And that's not an easy task to solve, because there's also some for revenue needed in this picture. So yeah, the third layer is algorithms. So we need the transparency, what's happening or why. So how the machine learning model is working under the surface. So to understand what the technology is doing. Then the model development to train the models with the data, and also having here evaluation and also checking for bias. And then the marketplaces where people are able to access these machine learning models, and also it must be possible that you are having the chance to make money with it, because you have to host all the infrastructure. And we have to ask us as open source community how we can provide this part of it, because it's needed. So also the cloud providers, but also Hugging Face or an Explosion are in the need to pay their developers. So they're building incredible open source products which are open for everyone to can be part of it and can use it, but they also need to be able to make money with it, because there's nothing wrong in having a working business model with open source. It's needed, so we are needing it. So we make some days I have some conservation. I'm talking to people and they are saying, okay, open source has to be free and did not cost any money, but that's wrong. You need always to build such an infrastructure and to provide access to such big machine learning models. You always need a model where you are able to make money with open source.
I agree. Actually, that's a very valid point. So, talking on to the democratization of NLP in specific. So first block, it talks about the rise of transformers. So we are witnessing a huge, tremendous growth in the area after the release of BERT, to be honest, actually. So many variants, so many new architectures, everything comes after this BERT, or even before Elmo or any other language model. So what do you count on it? Like how we can kind of if we talk about these kind of transform methodologies, some of the models are purely open source, I would say, and some of them are still with some kind of barriers to use it actually. So what is your opinion on that part?
As I said, so when we are looking at OpenAI, they are having a business model behind their GPT-3 model, and they want to make money with it. What's also okay, but on the other hand, we need also the opportunity to be part on these big models. We cannot leave it to them. So having an open source version of it, NeoGPT, is a good thing. So it's not, as community, we should not let it to the big players. And also Hugging Face, which is driving or open sourcing also bigger models, which are needed a lot of processing resources, and making them accessible in their cloud product. And yeah, we will be part of this journey when also a big model like GPT-3 is also easy accessible in some kind of an open source version of it. And as a researcher or academia, you are able to access this and use this technology for doing good stuff. Because yeah, when I'm looking at natural language processing in general, and also how to make it accessible or democratization of it, it's the question for what we are using this technology, like natural language processing. So at the moment we are in this evolution step where we are building these bigger models which are making language accessible and better analyze language for the computer or the machine learning model. But the question is what we want to do with this technology. And when we are looking into in the medical field, then you can use natural language processing to analyze a patient note or medical records to provide better research results, or to open source some kind of the research and make it accessible for a wider crowd. And that's the charming part of natural language processing, or how to make it accessible. It's also the question what we want to do with this technology, and using natural language processing for open research is, it's an incredible field, because then you have this high impact for society. So we are able to not leave pharmacotherapies or the research in pharmacotherapy only to the big players. We are also able to democratize the democratization of the access for smaller research teams or smaller academic researchers to access also a wider field for then doing also analyzing pharmacodata with machine learning, or able to access it. Yeah.
Got it. Got it. So yeah. So that covers a lot of things actually. So when I talk about this open sourcing all these transform models, like the first thing which comes to our mind is like these kind of packages actually, Hugging Face, Spacy, and TensorFlow Hub. And interesting part is that we all have that we can see there are quite like integrations between these packages as well. So recently that integration of Spacy pipeline into Hugging Face, or like photo models it is. So there are interconnections, and that is very it's a great thing for a developer actually, because whenever we build something, it's kind of like having that accessibility towards everything. So that's something I would like to know as the next question actually. So in terms of handshaking between these kind of packages, so for example, Spacy and Hugging Face, we all know there are actually good bond. Okay, but I would say like there are a lot of Google oriented models, or Google models actually, which alone comes in TensorFlow Hub, and which is not available in other repositories, or even likewise actually. So so how do you consider that, and like what should be the ideal approach on that?
Yeah, that's close the loop. That's the reason why we are needing open source, and don't leave it to the big players, because Google is having its own agenda about their model hub or their models. So, and it's some kind of closed. So, and then we are having Hugging Face and Spacy, which are team up and building this interconnection between them. So they are partnering here. And that's a strong indicator or a strong argument for not leaving it only to the big players as Facebook or Google with their technologies and their model hubs. So we are always in the need for the cool kids in the room, like Hugging Face and Spacy or Explosion.
That's
because then we are having a strong pressure also on the big players in the market, which are opening their ecosystem and making them more accessible, and also doing this interconnection.
Correct. So even when it comes to the accessibility also, there we can find the difference actually. So it's not the same experience we are getting when we are loading a model from TensorFlow Hub and then Hugging Face. There is significant difference actually, and how we are downloading the models from Spacy. So from an experience perspective also, it's evident that how it is kind of like packaging or versioning basically. So next big part is the mega models actually. So we can't count on it, because right now there are so many architectures which is coming, like switch transformers, or like even Big Bird or GPT-3. So it's increasing, and the number of parameters are increasing, computation is increasing exponentially. So do you think that all these models also will come to the repository? I think like anyway Big Bird and everything is already there on the Hugging Face repo. So what do you think, like is it possible to package and version control and to open source all of these bigger models available at this point?
After all, it's a distribution and infrastructure problem, because the infrastructure is not keeping track with the increase of the model size and also the needed resources to process the bigger models. So there are two aspects. The first one is that we are also in the need, at the moment we are scaling one aspect in natural language processing, that language or the words in a sentence are connected to each other and having some context which is processable. That's so, and then we are needing also more research in the aspect that we are not only increasing the processing abilities and the more data the models have seen in the training part, we also need some aspect that real language understanding. It's not at the moment in the big models, because that's some aspect. Yeah, there's more research needed to make a model real, or giving the model a real understanding about grammar, for example. The big models are you're scaling only this aspect that language is connected, and then you're scaling it. So this aspect to make the models smaller and need lower computation power, and then also the infrastructure, so that the internet connection is bigger, or also the hosting infrastructure for Hugging Face. And then it's a technology problem that because when you're using a big model like GPT-3, you do not need to process the big part. So OpenAI is providing an API or an interference API where you can access the big model and throwing in your use case or your data to fine tune. And that's also happening with the other big models, so that you're having an accessible or an access layer to the big models, which is not in the need of the full processing power. So, but then we have the problem of open sourcing the big models, and that's a question I cannot answer. I haven't a good idea at the moment, because that's some kind of a showstopper for open sourcing everything. So yeah, that's the question we have to ask us as open source community, how to make it possible to open source also the big models, and also provide the processing resources for everyone, that they can access these big models and use it for their research or for their use case.
Got it. Got it. So, couple of challenges which I would like to discuss with you. So, when it comes to open sourcing, like one of the major questions when we are bringing down the model to a formatable phase, or like in a client ready manner. So the first question is regarding the bias and fairness of the model. So have you like, did you face any challenge in that respect when it comes to this open sourcing anything on this particular front? Like when we do a model, okay, the first obvious question is this actually, like, okay, if it's an open source model, and how well it is actually tackling this bias and fairness.
It's always an aspect when I remember the starting days of GPT-3 and people are testing it, there was always this aspect that it was some kind of racial bias or racistic, or some parts of sexism within it, because regarding the data it was trained on. So when you're training your model on Reddit data, you have, yeah, it's part of the model. And I'm always saying it's also the aspect for us, the question to fix society, because that's behind it, because people are throwing their data into Reddit, and then we are training the machine learning model with it, and then we are having these bias or these issues. And it's also part that we are having this feedback loop and understand why we're having these bias, and then how to fix this when it's needed. And also the ethical or a society question, how to fix society.
Got it. Got it. So the next point is more on privatization of AI research. So when it comes to AI research, or like model building things actually, so we can, as you mentioned, like there is a bit of orientation towards academic side as well as on the private sector. So what will be happening in that front actually? Like if at all, like if the AI research is being delivered by the set of companies or set of big players versus a set of companies who are purely driven on the academia front.
Yeah, we have always these two aspects where when you're looking into the or let come from other we're having always this fight between academia and the research in the industry, because the most time the research in the industry is revenue driven. So they are pushing all their resources to build something where the company can make money with it. So, and then we are having this academia driven research, which is also doing this deep work, which is not always resulting in some kind or in a product where you can make money with. So it's needed, and we are having this competition. So when you're looking, academia and also the corporates are fighting for the same resources when we're looking at people or smart people which are doing research in the field of machine learning. And as community, we have to fight that the big players like Microsoft or Amazon always provide some kind of access for academic or for researchers, like scholarship for cloud access or for cloud credits to use this heavy infrastructure to do deep research, so that we can build later on better machine learning models, like a natural language processing model, which is aware of grammar structure or having this kind of understanding of language. So we need this deep research, and we have to fight that it's accessible.
Great. So, so the next question is more on the carbon footprint. So, like a lot of news actually came on whenever all these transform models are in production, or like while at the building phase, actually a lot of carbon emission is being reported actually. So, uh, so when it comes to open sourcing as well, like when we are talking about these heavy models, this is an issue actually. So, will it impact the democratization in the entire process actually?
That's part of it. Yeah, we have to. That's also here in this. There's also this that we are needing also the deep research for it, because most of the time we are doing machine learning with Python, for example, but we also need a leading force for a carbon-friendly machine learning, which is also using low resource language like Rust or Go.
Got it. Got it. So, so the next point is mainly on the interpretability of NLP models, actually. So, so often it's a question actually. Like whenever we develop some deep learning model, or like whenever we train an existing architecture, how well we can interpret it on another particular data set, or how well maybe if it's a simple classification problem, it's like how it's getting classified. So that is actually a question. And when the models are actually scaling in size, the interpretability is coming down actually. That's something which I noticed. So is it impacting the open source community in any way, or like on that part?
Yeah, it is, but it's also a technology problem. So we are needing better tools to analyze the results of the machine learning model and to have a transparent view of the model. So not only providing better models or bigger models, also better tools to analyze and providing transparency for the community. So, and then you're able to fix problems with bias or fairness.
Got it. Got it. True. So, so that wraps up like what all questions I have prepared actually. So I have some questions coming from our viewers. So the first question is from Kanut, and the question is like, how much deep learning does NLP automation need? So yeah.
Yeah, first, hi Knut. Cool question. By the way, everyone should follow Knut because he's providing incredible content, and he put a lot of effort into his content. Yeah, that's one of the aspects. Everyone want to do machine learning or doing these cool parts of machine learning, but after all, to access the data or access the data which will be then used to train the models, it's about optimization and scraping the internet, and it's an engineering part. So you're putting a lot of, when you're having a classic machine learning project where you're not already have some cool data sets, but you're in the need to scrape your own data, then you're putting a lot of the time you need for the whole project in this part. But people want only to do the training part and the machine learning part, but it's always this aspect of engineering and getting the data, cleaning the data, and it's taking a lot of time when you look at the whole project. And yeah, here web scraping is always pain. I hate it, but it's needed. And then yeah, there's this space for good tools which also making machine learning more accessible in providing easier access to be able to get the data you need to train the model. So for NLP, it's always about optimization and also scraping data and having the right tools to do it.
Cool. So the second question from Sandosh. So it's regarding the time management which you are actually being keeping. So like you kind of produce some 5 to 6 posts daily in LinkedIn and Twitter. So how you're managing time, and like what is your approach actually?
I used my skill set as engineer and built an infrastructure is using automation and using some machine learning to provide me data. But the last meters or the last instant is always hand crafted or hand created by me, because otherwise it's not cool. Then you are having some kind of bot content, and I dislike bot content. So for me, it's about using your engineering skills to manage content, and that's an important aspect for me. So using your engineering skill to save time in providing content. So for me, the content creation and then the cherry picking of which content I will use for my social media streams, they are having a lot of optimization, and then hand picking the right content and throwing it into LinkedIn and also Twitter.
Got it. Yeah. So the third one is on popular tools in deep learning and AI. I think we already covered that actually. We spoke about a lot of packages and tools. So, and the next one, so it's from it's on the question like, is it fully possible to have that democratization of AI in place? So
My guess is that we need to fight for it, and that there's a Google or a Microsoft which is not providing access to the latest models or possibilities how to process data and machine learning, because they built it into their products. And yeah, we have to keep the pressure that they are open sourcing their parts of their product to make them accessible, but that's only my prediction or point of view, that they are not providing us the full access to their technology.
correct. So the last question is from Afrin. So it's about what is the revenue model of open source platforms in general?
That's the interesting question and also part, because as said, you need some kind of a revenue model for providing access to open source. So, and when we are looking at Hugging Face, they having a paid tier for their interference API, and also looking for other opportunities to be able to monetize their product. And when we are looking at Explosion, having Prodigy, the machine learning annotating software, which is providing the revenue, and that Explosion is able to have this incredible open source library like Spacy. But yeah, it must be possible to make money with open source, and there's nothing wrong with it. So there are different possibilities to monetize it, but there are also cool open source products which are not getting it right. So they are not really able to monetize their product in a way that it works. So it's always, yeah, it's a good question, and it's also a question we have to answer as open source communities. So in which aspects we want to pay for the cool open source products, or to enable the companies behind these cool tools.
Got it. So that covers all the questions actually for today. And so once again, I would like to thank you for being part of this podcast. And yeah, so one more thing, like before wrapping up, so big congratulations to you actually for joining the Spacey community. And if you could talk about what role you will be actually having in the Explosion team and how you are going with it actually.
It's not a fixed role, so it's what we are making out of it. So for me, I call it, it's called community success. I call it, for me, community gardening, because it's taking care about the community and engage the community and doing cool stuff. But after all, it's what we are making out of it. So it's also about the community. So yeah, we are able to do incredible or cool stuff together to grow open source together.
Got it. So on the Spacey package, actually, like I have like a lot of memories, because when I started working as an NLP engineer, like the first package which I got exposed was NLTK. And
For me too.
so we all actually worked on that for quite a bit, and then it was a sudden gear towards Spacey, and while working with the use case entity recognition, and I can't really imagine how what to say, how well they have wrapped that particular entity recognition use case with Spacey by letting us to load the English language model. And going on, like after 2018, they even tried exploring the Spacey transformers. So when the transformer architectures became so popular, they actually geared up to that particular stage. And now that everything is being integrated, like I think almost all the models, and like now they even have the pipeline so that like we can plug and play whatever component we need. So the architecture behind Spacey is continuously evolving actually. Like that's something which I noticed uh, comparing other packages. So there were quite a number of packages like 4 or 5 years back, but like as time is actually passing by and the new kind of architectures are growing, Spacey is continuously evolving in that space in these kind of fronts. So that's something really interesting to watch. And like so what are the new products or like things which are being rolled out from Spacey, if you could explain?
There's something big coming, but I don't want to teaser it here because
Yeah.
it's not on me to teaser it. But to answer your question, it's we are seeing the surface of a library like Spacy. So we are seeing, okay, there's a cool API where we can access this cool library. But I can only say that they are putting a lot of effort and smartness into these libraries, and they are thinking sharp and clear about what to make and how to move. And they are more interested in a good quality product than in quantity to make everything accessible. They are saying, okay, we want to do this specific thing, but this in the best way we can do it. And they are throwing a lot of resources and working time in this library for this specific aspect to provide a high quality for a feature.
Got it, got it. Yeah, that's really interesting to know. And like yeah, and the news that you actually joined Explosion team, that's altogether a very happy thing to for every data science professional, actually, to be honest. So yeah. And it's time to wrap up today's session. And big thanks to Philip for taking part in this and answering like a lot of questions and taking time in discussing all these important points. And like yeah, thanks a lot, Philip, and thanks a lot, guys, for watching this interesting podcast.
I have also to say thank you
Yeah,
for being part of your podcast.
thank you everyone. Then.